Hi, Justice fans. Today we're talking about Sofia Vergara being sued by her own embryos and the fight over the Kardashian name and more.
You are tuned into Black Hollywood Lives. Justice is served.
Alrighty, let's get this show started. Welcome to Justice is Served here on Black Hollywood Live. Thank you for joining me. My name is Chelsea Galicia, joined by my reliable co-host, Shaka Smith. Thanks so much for being here.
Nice to be here. Nice to see you.
We've got kind of a random smorgasbord of good cases to talk about this week. Be sure to join us again next week, but then heads up, we're out the following week. So we are coming up on the last couple shows of the year.
Crazy, right? Wow.
And this show is kind of special for me personally because it marks 2 years of Justice for me.
Well, happy anniversary.
Well, thank you. A little pat for me on the back that I made it this far. And I don't know if there's any of you that have been fans of the show since I started, and hopefully you've noticed a remarkable improvement in my skills around here. But yeah, very excited that I have survived this long.
Yes, you have, and done it well. So
thank you, thank you. Okay, so we got to talk about this crazy story that I randomly love, and it has to do with being sued by embryos.
Yeah, wow, what a Sofia Vergara.
This ex cannot let go of her.
Yeah, talk about Modern Family. This is like the true. She's really living this out in reality here, right?
Yeah, so she was sued by him because he wanted custody over the embryos. That suit went nowhere.
Yeah.
So now he's done this thing where he went to the state of Louisiana, which has these, what I'm going to call kind of crazy pro-life.
Very pro-life, yeah.
Laws.
Yeah.
Set up a trust for these embryos if they should come to life for their education and health care. Yeah. Dude, I know some kids in Aleppo that would really need that help right about now. They are alive, hopefully still, if they haven't been slaughtered by their government. They could probably use the money in that trust, but I digress. So he sets up this trust in the state of Louisiana, and then has the embryos, which he named, by the way.
Yeah, Isabella and Emma, was it?
Yeah. And that's just creepy to me.
Well,
do you name your sperm, Shaka?
No.
I don't name my eggs.
No.
And I don't.
And yeah, and these aren't really embryos, they're pre-embryos. So yeah, they're fertilized ova. So an embryo is when you actually implant this fertilized ova into the uterus. So these are not even embryos yet, pre-embryos.
No, this takes, where does life begin to a whole new conversation.
For Louisiana and those laws, it looks like at the very, very beginning, because it looks like it's likely that he would prevail on the laws of Louisiana. But unfortunately, he may have signed away his right to these embryos.
So, unfortunately for who?
Well, yeah.
So he's suing for, or the embryos are suing for the right to be born.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. They amazingly had the right to an attorney before they had the right to be born.
That's a great suit to win, though, I'll tell you. Right to be born.
Okay. So I saw in an interview with Nick Loeb, Sofia Vergara's ex, about a year ago, that he believes that they have already created life. Yeah. And that agreement that they signed that says that only both of them can
consent
consent to bring them to life. He kind of waved that off saying, but that was signed at the beginning. Yeah, dude, that's when agreements are signed at the beginning to lay out the rules before you go into something.
And that's where you are. You're still at the beginning. They haven't nothing's been done with these embryos.
He somehow thinks that they're at a different phase now.
Well, I don't think he actually thinks that. It looks like, to me, he doesn't want to let go of the relationship. He doesn't want to let go of whatever those feelings were, wants to remain tied to her in some way. She's already married. She's moved on.
He presented it in that interview that, no, it was nothing to do with her, that it was about this life that they had already, or lives that they had already created, and he wanted to be a father to them. Okay, so you think that the embryos stand a good chance under the state laws?
Exactly. Under the state laws, Louisiana is very pro-life, and so it looks like the embryos, if a judge could reasonably find that the embryos have the right to life and should be implanted. However, it looked like he signed away his right to do that when he said that he and Sofia must consent to have those embryos brought to life, essentially.
Right. So I guess the question is whether the embryo's right to life trumps
the contract.
Right.
Or the state law. But
And in other words, whether those embryos' rights trump the rights of living human beings, i.e. Sofia Vergara's rights, with what to do over those pre-embryos.
Yeah, it's definitely, can you contract away life? And, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we talk about euthanasia and we say that you can't really do that. So it's almost, I could see him prevailing here.
Now, what?
I could see a judge in Louisiana.
Well, I mean, I guess I could see a crazy.
With these laws, that's what these laws are almost designed in a situation similar to this.
But the reason that I said I love this case is because I want it to go to the Supreme Court.
Oh yeah, certainly would. Yeah,
and
would
I
settle
think,
that this area of law. But do you want to go to the Supreme Court now that we?
And that's immediately where my mind went. And I mean, I definitely.
You want to get there by the time someone else is in office.
Let's even play worst case scenario game.
Yeah.
Let's say that we have an Antonin Scalia 2.0.
Yeah.
That gets into the Anthony Scalia 1.0 seat. Even in that situation, if Scalia was a strict constructionist who only believed that the exact words in the Constitution are what the founders meant, they didn't speak anything in there of embryos having a right to life. So I think Scalia would be like, this is a stretch because I don't see this in the Constitution.
Then you're redefining what a person is, and so that's where they would have to eventually go in order to get that there.
Yeah. So I see this. If it went to the Supreme Court, come on, Sophia, you could do it. Just take it all the way. And I could see these laws being struck down, and that's the only reason why I have a real interest or like of this case at all. Otherwise, it's just is ridiculous and frivolous.
I think if the Supreme Court gets more and more conservative, you'll see the definition of personhood get earlier and earlier and earlier, and to the point where it might be that a fertilized ova then has the same rights as a person. So I don't think that.
Be careful, because in every man's used condom now it has boatloads of lives in there, and now you're responsible for what happens to them.
I don't know if it'll go that far because
the slippery slope is quite slippery.
But I think the fertilization aspect is something that proponents will seize on, and so.
Oh man, I mean, what drives me crazy about this is that we have real, live children on this planet that need so much love and attention, and we're arguing over whether we should give pre-embryos.
But to some people, those real life children are the same as the pre-embryo. I mean, they're the same. They're tantamount.
They're the exact same.
Life is life to some people. Yeah.
I don't even know what to do with. I mean.
Some people value their pets more than they would value another person, So some people just view life as life, and so I can see, and I think the laws are designed, at least in Louisiana, to kind of attack these sort of cases. So.
Okay.
I don't know if I agree with it, but I certainly see.
You don't know?
Yeah,
okay.
I certainly see where they're going with this. So I do think he's got a likelihood of, I'd say, a better than 50% chance of prevailing.
And
because I think they're going to want to find in his favor. So
I don't know. And the other thing that occurred to me right now is that let's just say this goes to the Supreme Court. Before the justices will even consider the crux of your case, you have to have standing.
Yeah.
You have to show that you are inevitably harmed.
Yeah.
Are these embryos inevitably harmed?
Well, certainly from Nick's standpoint,
But from the embryo's standpoint, they're not harmed.
But
But
he's also bringing suit too. So
I don't think that his suit survived because it got tossed.
I thought that he was part of this suit as well.
No, that's why he filed the suit under the embryos, because he doesn't really have much of a recourse, as I understand it. But this will be fascinating to see. I can't imagine that this is very easy for Sofia Vergara to go through, and I feel bad saying I'm so fascinated by this, and it's something
that's personal.
Yeah, but I think that it facilitates a conversation that this country needs to have, and I understand,
And this one's a little bit more
wanting
complicated than this one's a little bit more complicated than your typical situation,
Wanting to support life, that's really fascinating, but saying that unborn life is the exact same as life that's already here and is already suffering. That somebody's going to have to try really hard to convince me of, because I just don't see it. The life living right now that's suffering, I think, deserves the love and attention over literally cells.
Well, I think that's a practical argument, but I think other people.
God forbid we be practical.
Well, there you go, God. I think people have a belief system, and so if your belief system
think God is practical.
Yeah, so if people have a belief system that's no life is different than no matter what stage it's at, then that's what's going to govern how they're going to look at this particular case. So that's what the law in Louisiana is, and that's what they're looking at, and the judge wants to find in favor.
The interesting part about, as we get more and more specific about when life begins, the more we must rely on this thing called science.
Yeah.
Because it's only scientists and scientific study and scientific tools and instruments that allow us to see all of this stuff. Like we wouldn't even.
But now we're going back to the heartbeat rule, and some jurisdictions are trying to enact that.
Ohio governor just vetoed the heart rate, the heartbeat.
And then they had the follow-up. Yeah.
The 20-week one he signed.
Yeah. So that's going to certainly begin.
Those were both abortion bills that he was given the option to sign.
And so I think you're going to end up pushing these goalposts, further and further away. And then, the heartbeat rule might come back 2 years from now. Or
Until the government then, has a say over the eggs that sit in my womb. And then, somebody's going to force me, somebody who at this time is not inclined to have children, to have kids, because these eggs inside of me are the potential for life, and now I'm going to be forced.
Well, I would say fertilized once again.
Yeah, but you're saying that this is going to go more and more further back. I mean, it's possible right now for science to extract the eggs from me and use them to create life. Am I soon going to have no say over that? Hopefully, by the time that happens, I'll be too old.
Yeah, I'm going to say if we're talking over the course of the next 50 to 100 years, depending on what the Supreme Court
hopefully
looks like.
Hopefully, I'd hit menopause in 50 years.
That could certainly happen, but yeah.
Hopefully not sooner. Anyways, I know that I will. Geez, I'm getting up there. Okay. So we will definitely be following that. Yeah. And then we will move on now to the Kardashian name battle. This was something that I wasn't anticipating was going to be a battle, but then now I realize it kind of has to be.
Yeah, to some degree. So it looks like Blac Chyna, who's supposed to be marrying Rob Kardashian, and plans to change her name to Angela Renee Kardashian, went to go trademark her name with the USPTO, and the Kardashians have issued sort of a cease and desist,
no
against,
go. Yeah, so this is kind of fascinating to me because, okay, I see from her side, she thinks she's going to get married, which, by the way, is a whole nother conversation. Like, I like how you qualified the conversation with she's supposed to get married.
Yeah, because who knows what's happening.
Who knows? This whole conversation could be completely irrelevant in like 30 seconds if they break up, but it does pose an interesting legal question.
Yeah.
That may be her legal name, and she wants to protect it.
Well,
sure.
Yeah.
I see that side.
Yeah. So, there's Angela Renee Kardashian, and that's your legal name. But if you're trading on that name as part of the Kardashian empire, then you're kind of trading on that goodwill.
Exactly.
And that's the problem. The only reason I would think she'd want to trademark Angela Renee Kardashian is to trade on that goodwill.
Yeah, absolutely. And as compared to some random Jane Smith off the street who tries to, use the name, what's her name? Angela Renee Kardashian, against a random person off the street who tries to use that name, sure, Blac Chyna, do you see why it's so difficult for me to follow these names, should own that and be able to use it to her benefit and not be able to have it hijacked by some random person who wants to make money off that name.
Yeah.
So against the public, I see that it's fair. But as to the Kardashian women.
Yeah, it's going to dilute, in their argument, at least the three sisters, it's going to dilute their, basically their trademark.
Yeah, so the dilution argument is like, yeah, kinda.
Well,
but the stronger argument is the confusion that it creates.
Yeah, the confusion, but if she decides to make lines of mugs and lines of this that have Angela Renee Kardashian, she can use that name, so it's going to certainly dilute that brand.
Yeah, so the whole point of trademarks is to be clear about what it means when you use a certain sign, color scheme, name.
There's no confusion in the market.
Right, that who it is. So I can't open up a restaurant with like red awnings and like yellow with it and have like an arch,
Yeah.
2 arches as a symbol.
Most people would
and
be
sell
confused,
burgers.
exactly.
They would think I was
McDonald's.
Right. Even if I never even called myself McDonald's, if I made it look like a McDonald's restaurant,
Yeah.
that would be an infringement on their trademark. So same thing with people here.
Yeah.
These women have created brands for themselves.
Yeah.
And if she does like a line of, let's say, food or something, kind of outside of their wheelhouse,
Yeah. But I mean,
it's not exactly confusing because the public, their brand is not food.
But their brand it's so vast that if I saw something labeled Kardashian with food, I would assume it was related to them.
It's true, but trademark law doesn't allow you to, like, as much as they might not like this, own the world. Like,
Yeah.
even McDonald's had to file separate trademarks for use in different regions, parts of the world. Like,
Yeah.
you can't. If I have a business and it has a certain color scheme, somebody on the other side of the planet who uses the same one isn't infringing on my trademark. It has to be where I'm in business.
Yeah, it's going to be tough because they're so ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and they do have their hands in a lot of different areas that are tangentially related to other areas. So, you'd have to do something in an area that was so unrelated and different to them as to make people go, this is probably not the Kardashians.
Well, yeah, and
So
then
if you're talking about fashion or,
then for sure that's
yeah.
a crossover. So, I mean, it seems like, if she ever uses a trademark, it needs to come with like a parenthetical, like, not Kim, Courtney, Khloe
Yeah,
endorsed.
exactly.
Because that's the other problem, is that it looks like anything she does is endorsed by Courtney, Kim,
Yeah.
and Khloe because of the name association.
Exactly.
And let's say, I don't know, Blac Chyna, I understand she's a former stripper, so if I was going to say she had a pole, but I think having the Kardashians had, I don't know. But I'm just trying to think of something that
Yeah.
Blac Chyna would want to, license a line of
Yeah.
that the Kardashian women would not want to be associated with.
Yes.
What recourse would they have at that point?
Well, yeah, once she has a trademark, that's hers, so...
So if Blac
If it was
Chyna
like sex
tried,
toys, for example. Yeah.
okay, good example.
Yeah.
Although I could see in my eyes Khloe going that direction, but be that as it may. Perfect example.
Yeah.
Blac Chyna wants to do a line of sex toys. The Kardashian women are like, we want nothing to do with
Yeah.
that, but then they're associated with it
Yeah.
in the marketplace because their name is on the
And
product.
it's close enough where people go, oh, I could see Khloe doing that, so it probably is them, And so
Yeah.
that would be the problem.
Yeah, so this is actually a really sticky situation, and
Yeah.
I don't see a clear-cut solution.
Well, and as their lawyer noted, why didn't she do it when she was with Tyga, married Tyga? She didn't trademark her name then,
Yeah,
So it's not just...
but that's an interesting point to make, and it just goes to show that Blac Chyna's stands to make more money off the
Well, I
Kardashian
think-
name.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
But
that's the
your-
point. She's speaking.
But
She's
your
going to trade on the goodwill.
your motivation for seeking a trademark is kind of irrelevant.
No, I think it's not relevant. If they know that you're trying to trade on the goodwill of someone else's name, and that's why you're getting the trademark, that'll be prima facie evidence to deny the trademark.
Well, if the goal is to make money off the name and it's her legal name, she would have the right to do that.
Unless if they can show specific evidence that she's only doing this to trade on the goodwill of the Kardashian name, then she can't get the trademark.
Okay,
yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
All right, so that will actually be an ongoing saga. I know there's a whole, element like the inside story about what's going on with them personally
Well,
and all that.
We've heard all this drama about Chris, whether reaching out to her and
Yeah, and-
But we'll stick to the legal facts for now.
Yeah,
Too much
exactly.
drama in that family.
Exactly. I mean, I kind of hope that we get a decision on this and that they don't break up before, just because I'm really curious about the legal ramifications of this little battle here. Okay, and now a sad story that feels strangely parallel to a story we did last week on Joe McKnight. NFL star Will Smith was killed earlier this year in a road rage incident, also in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And Will Smith's killer was convicted this week.
Yeah, so he was convicted of manslaughter and attempted manslaughter because Will Smith's wife was in the car and he'd actually shot at her and I believe hit her.
I didn't believe that she was hit, but she collapsed and played dead because she thought that was her best chance at survival.
Yeah. So.
I cannot imagine being in that situation. But yeah, the interesting thing here for me was that the original charge was for second-degree murder.
Yeah, but the jury opted to for manslaughter. And I think that the element of the case is why the jury kind of ultimately came down on manslaughter and attempted manslaughter, because there wasn't a road rage incident before Will Smith had exited the vehicle, and so there was that sort of confrontation. So
yeah. Additionally, I thought that made, I don't know, but I kind of, I don't know. The road rage incident actually included like the vehicles hitting.
Yeah.
That takes things kind of to another level. It's different for me than like somebody cutting somebody else off. The vehicles touching, like your adrenaline. I mean, my car was hit this weekend. I wasn't even in it. It was parked, and my adrenaline jumped just at the sight of it. Well, because actually I was in my friend's house. My car was parked on her street, and I heard the crash outside. I go outside to look to see what happened, make sure everybody's okay. I look at my car just because a voice tells me, look at your car, and sure enough, it had been run into in the crash. So I get how an actual crash would make
give
the
you that
adrenaline.
sort of heat of passion.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would say I get that goes towards like a second degree. Like that's a.
I think there was an idea of whether or not Will Smith was kind of an aggressor in this action, and I think that's why the jury probably went with the manslaughter.
And the jury knew that Will Smith was driving above the legal limit. Probably in their mind, he was drunk, and therefore it sounds more feasible that he was like aggressive, and he did come out of the car.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, the picture of him that was painted was not that of a completely innocent
But
person.
I think manslaughter and the attempted manslaughter were appropriate. He faces up to 60 years in jail as a result, 40 years on the man charge and 20 years on the attempted. So.
Yes, and I think probably because of the outpouring from the Saints and how many people packed the courtroom, that and that you have the testimony of the wife who watched the whole thing, that when it's this emotional, I have a sense that the jury is going to find on the higher end of this possible 60 years.
Yeah, I agree.
You're on that same page too? All right. So we will find out on February 17th what the actual sentence will be. In the meantime, we'll get an update on the Lee Baca corruption case. For me, this is just riveting. Not only it's like the top sheriff in Los Angeles, one of the largest cities in the country, in the world, and this guy, I think we're going to watch him go down. I mean, he was already ready to plead guilty to this, but then when he tried to find out just how long he was going to be in jail for, and the judge is like, I'm not going to tell you that right now. He's like, oh, never mind, let's go to trial instead. Apparently he was concerned about how long he was going to be in jail and where he would be in his Alzheimer's. Like, dude, after a while, I guess you won't know well, that's not funny. I'm going to stop myself midway through that comment. Okay. Sometimes I can go, that sound, oh, no, that's not good.
Bring it back. Let's bring it back.
Yeah. Okay. Because I do think that Alzheimer's is a really terrible and tragic disease, and I think it's being a little like cartooned by the way that Lee Baca is using it. So I kind of have a little less sympathy for him, and I have less sympathy when I hear by a former deputy who is right now convicted, sitting in jail, and who testifies to the culture of the jails.
Yeah, just the way they were abusing the prisoners. Yeah,
beating inmates that were cuffed, that really did not deserve it. I don't know an inmate that does really deserve to be beat up. Restrained maybe, but beat up, no. How rampant it was, and who knew about it, because that is the big question of this case.
Exactly.
Lee Baca is like, yeah, everybody knew about this.
But me.
But me. My number 2 man, he knew, not me.
Yeah.
And I almost want to say, if he knew, send him away. If he didn't know, send him away, or completely take away his entire pension because he should have frickin' known
Yeah,
and done something about it.
Yeah, and
So either way, I have very little sympathy for the man.
yeah, this was such a pervasive scheme, especially with the FBI informant and moving the informant around. And
Yeah, I mean, the details of this are just, if there hasn't been
there's
got to
be a movie that's made about something
Yeah,
like
so it was fascinating. So the guy who testified this week said that he was convicted of bribery
Yeah.
because he was offered $1,500
Yeah.
in order to in exchange for bringing in a cell phone.
Yeah, unbeknownst to him, he was offered that by an FBI informant to then give that cell phone to another FBI informant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the FBI informant that was in prison, Anthony Brown,
Yeah.
once the department got wind that he became an informant, they started deleting his name
Yeah,
in the
changing
records.
his name, moving him around different prisons. Yeah.
Right. Whoa. I know that somebody else that is going to testify soon is somebody who got a verbal talking to, like a whiplash, a verbal whiplash, from Baca specifically about these events. So that's going to be used to tie him to the fact that he absolutely knew that this was going on.
Yeah, I think it's not going to go well for him for the outcome of this case.
Yeah. Yeah, you heard it here first. Okay, and a case that we have to talk about that I almost considered not talking about because I was afraid to talk about the hate that Dylan Roof spewed, even from his confession. And so I was like, maybe we should just shelve the conversation about the guilt because we already know he's guilty. We'll wait till the penalty phase because I'm afraid that if we cover this story, these details too closely, sorry, I think I almost spit on you, that we're going to be regurgitating his hatred.
Not necessarily. I think sunlight's the best disinfectant, and I think when you say these things and you put these stories out there, I think it's good in some ways for people to hear the jarring comments that are being made.
Yeah. But I think I'm getting my approach from Oprah, like where I get everything in life from, because early on in her show, she had on members of the KKK, and then she realized that she was actually giving them a voice and giving them a platform that she didn't want to. So I was coming at it from that same perspective.
I don't know if I would have him on as a guest, so no. But I think parsing through the words after they've already been laid out there, and I'm kind of going through it in that way, I think it can be beneficial.
So, I mean, I was planning on okay, maybe we don't even talk about it, but this case has gone by so fast. I mean, we're almost at the end.
Yeah, we kind of have to talk about it because it's over.
Yeah, so the prosecution was done. They put on the witness who survived the shooting. She survived the shooting because he specifically chose a victim not to kill so she could share the story. Yeah. And that woman watched her son be shot 5 times and die. And so that testimony has wrapped up. The prosecution has rested. The judge then turned to Dylan Roof, asked him if he wanted to testify. He declined. It's his right to do so, to not testify. And the defense did not offer any witnesses. And so now we just have closing arguments tomorrow, and then it'll go to the jury.
Yeah, so looks pretty cut and dry, so hopefully no surprises.
Yeah,
hopefully
so
a quick verdict.
Next week we'll know, and then we'll be on to the real issue in this case is whether he should have life in prison or the death penalty. All right, so then let's move
Did you have an opinion on that? I know you're anti-death penalty, but...
I'm anti-death penalty a lot because I see of the inequitable way that it's applied. When blacks and Hispanics have a higher rate of having the death penalty applied, when there's so many times that new scientific DNA evidence is showing that people were not guilty of crimes in the first place, that we find out now that eyewitness testimony is not as reliable as we think. Those kinds of things make me against the death penalty. In this case, it doesn't fit into those objections for the death penalty. Yeah. I also object to how much money it costs. I understand the need for appeals and all that, but I mean, it's just such a suck on the system. Yeah. But then in some cases it actually costs more for the government to kill someone than keep them alive for life.
Yeah.
But if by killing somebody you also kill their hatred, I want it dead.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where I am on that one. Okay, nice and light today, huh?
Right. Yeah, we started that way.
Right. Okay. So then, now, see this article right here.
Yeah.
This on the Florida sentencing system.
So it speaks to every reason you don't want the death penalty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here is a rare instance, because I don't see very much of this anymore.
Yeah.
Really serious investigative journalism.
Yeah.
Serious kudos go out to the Herald Tribune
Yeah.
for this massive undertaking. We don't really see this anymore.
Yeah, it took a while. Yeah.
I mean, let me just. I'm reading straight from the article, but just so you get a sense of what they did. Herald Tribune spent a year reviewing tens of millions of records in 2 state databases. One compiled by the state's court clerks that tracks criminal cases, and the other by the Florida Department of Corrections. And they examined more than 85,000 criminal appeals, read through boxes of court documents, and crossed the state to interview more than 100 legal experts, advocates, criminal defendants, the judges that they talk about in these cases. They also reached out to them. So the newspaper built a one-of-a-kind, or first-of-its-kind database of Florida's criminal judges to compare sentencing patterns based on everything from a judge's age and previous work experience to race and political affiliation. Yeah. And their goal here was to see
what, if any, disparities there were among sentencing.
Yeah, and what they found is that there is a massive
Huge,
bias.
Yeah, and in so many cases, whites were given either half the amount of time or even like a third of the time that black defendants were receiving.
And the state of Florida has implemented a system that was trying proactively to be fair.
Yeah, we have a point system. So basically, once you meet a certain amount of points, then there's a minimum sentence or your maximum sentence. And so that point system should make it equitable for everyone.
Except it doesn't.
Yeah, but then we have the advent of plea deals. And as we know, most things get,
I saw
out.
that as one of the reasons why a judge gave for the reason why there's this disparity. The judge was like, don't look at us. We just get these pleas on silver platters, and we basically rubber stamp them, so don't blame me. But that sort of takes away some of the responsibility that judges still have.
Because they do have, they certainly have the discretion to, lower the amount of time in a plea deal.
Right, and so in some of the cases, it didn't seem that they were giving black people higher sentences than would be expected, but they gave white people lower or no jail sentences. In this article, it covered a case of a guy that held up a convenience store and got probation.
Yeah, and they had a similar case of another guy that did the same. Then he got 6 months or a year in prison.
Yeah.
And so the problem was a lot of the judges, there's not much diversity there. And so you're looking at, I believe it was less than 7% of the judges in Florida are black.
Yeah.
And of that 7%, about half are assigned to serious felonies.
Yeah.
So you're getting serious underrepresentation. And quite frankly, if a judge is not aware of his bias, when he looks at someone that looks like him, he's going to see something more redeemable in that person.
Yes.
And so versus an idea of other, and I'm fearful of you, and you need to be locked away.
Right.
And so it might just be, it's definitely a bias that I don't think every judge is aware of, but it exists. And so there needs to be some sort of...
Apparently judges get about 90 minutes of bias training.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
At the beginning of their career. That's definitely not enough to overcome a lifetime of potential bias that's built in. I also found it very interesting that they cite the war on drugs as one of the big reasons why this disparity exists so much.
Well, it certainly made everyone
kind of like a confirmation of what we know.
Because it certainly made black people, people in inner cities look more violent and more as if they were just more prone to committing crime after crime after crime.
Right.
So you had to lock them away forever.
Not. Yeah. There were. Let me see. I have to go through this. I don't want to miss. I spent so long. This was a massive article.
Yeah, because they compared all different crimes. They compared robberies. They compared just different across the board, and across the board they found the same thing.
Right. There were so many moments, so many things that I read in here that I was like, holy crap, holy shit, oh my, probably no less than a dozen times that I said that throughout. So I really recommend that you look up this article.
Because a lot of times we don't pay much attention. We talk about guilt or innocence, and we're not necessarily looking at, oh, both people are guilty. How much time are they serving?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there are very few cases of like overt racism. One criminal judge asked to be reassigned after saying an attempted murder case was NHI. Had you ever heard of that?
No.
NHI is an acronym that stands for No Humans Involved. It refers to cases where the defendant, victims, and witnesses are all black. And so they're called No Humans Involved.
Yeah.
What? That person needs to be like kicked out of the country.
You're
like, I'm not going to go that far.
No, I was going to say I'm not all that surprised, but yeah.
I mean, I guess, I've been here in LA my whole life, so I am surprised, but you're from Florida.
Yeah, and so, outside of like Miami and some certain areas, it's a very hostile environment.
I mean,
to be
as I was reading this, I'm like, oh, thank God Shaka's here.
Yeah, they're
I mean, I know that you don't plan to like commit any crimes, but like just in case you were accidentally.
You're picked up, and then we already have that problem. But yeah, Miami's pretty diverse, so that's probably where you're getting that 7%. But then the rest of Florida is not so diverse.
Yeah, this was really eye-opening. And one other thought, other thing that I thought was really interesting was that there was a study done by a couple of universities that tested implicit bias on the internet. It took millions of people to do, and it found that 3/4 of participants showed at least some negative biases towards blacks. The test reveals that men are more biased than women, and conservatives are more biased than liberals. So as a liberal woman, I am apparently as unbiased as they get.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's true. Yeah. Okay. And finally, we have an idea that somebody at the ACLU has proposed a way to enforce body cams magically functioning or magically being on at the right time.
Yeah.
Because already we're seeing problems of them not being turned on or malfunctioning or who knows what. And that's being used by police officers to not cover what actions they took.
Yeah.
And so there's an idea that says, well, if you don't have your body camera on, when you go to testify, the jury can choose to throw out what you say or to not believe what you say in light of the fact that there is no body cam evidence to back it up.
Yeah, I love this jury instruction. Obviously, if the jury finds it was deliberate, in order to cover something up, then they'll disregard your testimony. If they believe, however, it was reasonable that, you didn't have it on because maybe you stepped to do something privately for a second and, and then that's when whatever incident took place. So if they find there's a reason why your body cam wasn't on, then your testimony will be taken in light of all the evidence.
Yeah, so the reason that I liked this is because this doesn't pass a new law, doesn't make the, but I think that a lot of us, and I didn't probably until pretty recently realize that what the law says is not even most of what makes a difference. What makes a difference is A, its enforcement, and B, the jury instructions.
Yeah.
The jury instructions are so important. Yeah. They're basically equivalent to the law itself in terms of importance.
Of course, because what the jury understands is going to, determine guilt or innocence.
Yeah.
And so if the jury thinks, manslaughter is, stealing an M&M off a table, then they're going to convict you of manslaughter.
Right.
If they think it's something else, and that's what they'll go with.
Yeah. So when somebody looks to alter the jury instructions, it sounds smart to me because, we don't need this whole, and we all look at we need to look out for our politicians and the laws that they pass. Yes, we do, and we also need to look at the jury instructions because they're just as important. And I think this one is a really great idea. So since both of us agree that we like the idea, we're probably going to have a hard time coming up with reasons why it's a bad idea.
Yeah, well, I like that it's specific in that it actually speaks to the harm of why someone might turn the camera off. That they might turn it off to cover up the truth. And so now you're literally going, if we find you turn it off to cover up the truth, we will not take your testimony because you're probably lying there too.
Yeah.
So I liked how it just really gets to the heart of it.
Yeah, I like it. All right. I like it, and I think we're done.
Yeah.
All right. Well then, thank you so much. Please be sure, like, comment, tweet, subscribe. Let us know your thoughts. You can tweet me at Chelsea Galicia. For some reason, I made it through the whole show with some words and then lost them at the end. Shaka, you want to share yours?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat at Shaka Strong.
And don't forget to come back next week for another episode of Justice is Served. Have a great one, everyone.
Bye, guys.
From executives Keven Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African-American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.